Unit 17, Richard Steele's The Spectator Club. The Spectator is a periodical journal published in London by the very famous essayist Sir Richard Steele and his friend Joseph Addison from March 1, 1711. It succeeded the Tatler, which Steele had launched in 1709. The Spectator adopted a fictional method of presenting through a Spectator Club, in which they have created many imaginary members and they have presented there as a characters. And they are Sir Andrew Freeport, Captain Sentry, Will Honeycomb, Sir Roger D. Coverley, Mr. Spectator. So these are all the imaginary members. They are all the characters who have taken from different field like commerce, army, town, and other disciplines with reference to. The conversation that the Spectator reported were often imagined to take place in coffee houses, which was also where many copies of the publication were distributed and read. Richard Steele was born in Dublin, Ireland, in the year 1672 in the month of March. The exact date of birth of his is unknown. Steele had dedicated many poems, and a poem which is dedicated on the funeral of Queen Mary became Steele's patron. Steele first served him as private secretary and then became an officer in Cutts Regiment in 1697. 2 years later, Steele received a captaincy in a foot regiment. On April 12, 1709, Steele launched his own paper, The Tatler, to be published 3 times weekly, partly a newspaper and partly a journal of politics and of society events. The Tatler soon featured essays on general questions of manner, morality, and entertainment. The great majority of Tatler issues were authored by Steele Addison, writing about 46 by himself and 36 in conjunction, that means in addition with Steele. The Tatler, though prosperous, discontinued publication for obscure reasons on January 2, 1711. The first issue of Tatler's brilliant successor, The Spectator, appeared on the day March 1, 1711. In this paper, as in Tatler, Addison followed Steele's choice of subject. The Steele Addison combination, the great literary partnership, ranked one of the most successful in the history of English literature and as well as in the field of journalism. Both men were Whigs and sympathized with the moral attitude of England's rapidly growing middle class. Spectator had run of 555 daily numbers, discontinuing publication on December 6, 1712. Of this number, Steele authored about 240 issues. Steele made many additional forays into periodical journalism. The most notable of these, some of which were purely political, were The Guardian, The Englishman, The Lover, and The Belgian. The most famous political journal involved him in a dispute with Addison, whose death happened in the year 1790, frustrated Steele's attempt to reconciliation. During these years, Steele served as a chief Whig propagandist, as a principal journalist of the Whigs in opposition. He was the antagonist of Jonathan Swift, who held the corresponding job for the Tories. Steele's writing frequently made his political career perilous. Appointed commissioner of stamps in the year 1710, and he was forced to resign from the office in the following year, 1713. After the accession of George I to the English throne in the year 1714, Steele obtained a number of political favors. In 1722, he wrote his last and most successful comedy, The Conscientious Lover. He went to live on his wife's estate at Langwar in Wales, and in 1726, he suffered of paralytical stroke. His health broken, Steele died at Carmarthen, Wales on September 1, 1729. Let me explain the critical analysis of the text, The Spectator. The Spectator Club, Richard Steele, summary The Spectator, one of the most important periodical. I already told you that. Richard Steele wrote the series of 555 issues, and Joseph Addison, the second series of 79 actually. The Tatler, the Steele, Addison, and comprised the two main writers, but several issues were written by others, all of whom were associated with the coffee house culture of the 18th century London literary. The Spectator Club is perhaps Richard Steele's finest achievements. I already told there are many imaginary characters, members of Spectator. These members are represent important section of society. Steele describes six of the members of the club. They are Sir Roger D. Coverley, Captain Sentry, Sir Andrew Freeport, Will Honeycomb, the clergyman, and the student of law. Steele talks about the first gentleman of his company, whose name is Sir Roger D. Coverley. The people who knew about the country of Sir Roger knew Sir Roger. Sir Roger was a man of extraordinary nature and had a good sense actually. He was a bachelor because he was disappointed in the love of a beautiful widow. Before this disappointment, Sir Roger was a normal, happy young man. He moved in the society of important persons like Roger Rochester and Sir George Akerridge. However, after being ill-used by the widow, he lost all his joviality and interest in the social life for more than a year. He had such a good nature that the people loved him. He also treated his servants well. He was also the justice of the quorum and shows his judicial abilities on the thick hair of the justice. Steele has described the other companion of the club. He is a lawyer. He was also a bachelor like Sir Roger D. Coverley. He was a man of sharp wit and clear understanding. He took to the study of law in obedience to his father. The philosophers like Aristotle, Longinus were well understood by him. His father used to send him various questions on law in order to ensure his son's progress in legal study. Nobody took him as a fool, but now only his friend knew what he had a great wit. He liked to read the books which were not the age he lived actually. His real offer of business was the time of the play. The presence of able critic among the audience to arouse the actors to give the best performance possible. The next character is discussed by him is Sir Andrew Freeport, who was a good businessman in London. He was very laborious, experienced, and a great understanding. His knowledge of commerce was extensive. He had his own ideals of the ways of enlarging a country's trade. He was of the opinion that a dominant may be extended by the art and industry than by power. Diligence or industry alone would help the country to gain things really very sorry to gain things of permanent value and sloth or idleness more than the sword. He knew many short maxims. He had a unique art of speech. After the character Sir Andrew, the author talks about Captain Sentry, a very courageous, intelligent, and a good understanding man. A man who had not received good consideration of his ability. He had been captain in military for some years and fought bravely on fronts. He left the army because even though he rendered meritorious service, he was of the opinion that it is cowardice to stand back modestly. Similarly, a man who failed to assert himself and demand what was his due was a coward. He was frank in part of his character, though he commanded many persons in military, he was never naughty. He had an attractive personality. He would impress women by his talk. He dressed well and was well acquainted with the history of very faction and that remained the vogue in England. Will Honeycomb was always interested in matters pertaining to women, who is the next character discussed by the Steele. But the author says that he was a gentleman. Living the relationship of women, he was an honest and worthy man. At the end of the essay, the author tells about one of his companions who seldom met with him. He was a philosopher and a clergyman who lived a sacred life. He was very weak in constitution. Because of ill health, he could not fulfill the responsibilities which promotion in the church might have brought him. He spoke on divine topic with authority. He wished for the good of the world even after the death. Let I summarize the essay. Already I told you that in the essay, he talks about the six members who are the imaginary characters, who are the imaginary members of the club. Sir Roger D. Cavalli, Captain Sentry, Sir Andre Fubot, Will Honeycomb, clergyman, and the law of the student. And he actually discusses the character, attitude, personality, and their life, fortune, misfortune of these six imaginary characters. And through this, he tells a message to the reader that the man who are in different perceptions or in different form of life, they would teach a message to us. This is what actually I want to tell you. Steele writes that there is one another seldom visits because of his poor health, but when he does, he is enjoyable company. Even though the person, the followers who have positive attitude despite of the poor health, but they are the one who represents individual like the clergyman, intellectual knowledge, passion, entertaining, interest, happiness, joy. So everything matters with the way you represent, you concern with the people. So these are the key terms. I have actually given the details of the characters, and these are all the terminal questions. Thank you so much.